Sean about his brain, the podcast where I, Sean, embark on a journey to understand what's happening in my own head. Spoiler alert, I have no clue, but that's precisely why we're here. In each episode, I explore questions about the brain that I believe will resonate with all of us. Like, why can't I turn my brain off at 3 a.m.? Why my memory only works when it feels like it? And why my brain seems to betray me when I need it most. Listen, I'm not a scientist. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy looking to unravel the mysteries of my own mind. Fortunately, I happen to know a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert in the brain, and I get to ask him all the questions I want. So, if you're curious, confused, or simply along for the ride, welcome. And hey, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, or whatever it is you do wherever you listen to podcasts. I don't know how the algorithms work. I just know that your support keeps this journey moving forward. And together, we might just discover something remarkable. This is John Teaches Sean about his brain. Let's get started. Hi, John. It's good to see you.
Hey, Sean. Good seeing you too. How are you doing?
I am great, thank you. How are you?
Good. Doing good.
Good. What is on your mind this week?
So I read an article that I thought was fascinating. And to be honest, my daughter pointed it out to me. She said, "Hey, Dad, did you see this article about scientists have created a new color for people to view, or they've helped people view a new color?" And I was like, that's not possible, really. The way, we just talked about the law of specific nerve energies in our last
That's a law.
podcast, where,
We talked about it being a law.
Yeah, and it's a law now. And so you can't just make a new color. And I said, the only way you could, unless you isolate some of the cone receptors in the eye, but we aren't able to do that yet. And she said, well, it says right here, that's what they did. I'm like, what? So I looked at it, and they did isolate a cone receptor in the eye, which that's a whole nother story to talk about what that means and what that is. But they were able to come up with a color that they're calling Olo. And Casey said, well, that's like taking the C and the R off of color. And I was like, oh, it is. I hadn't thought of that. They named it.
I was gonna ask what it's OLO. Right?
OLO. I think
didn't
that's
know if
Olo
that
or
was
Olo.
some Latin.
No, I think what I read. So when Casey said that, I was like, oh, maybe they did. Like they changed the color, so they just took the first and last letter off the word or something. But they said what they did is for the typical person with color vision, you have 3 different cone types: a short wave cone, a medium wave, and a long wavelength cone. So short, medium, and long. And they isolated the medium wavelength cone. So they turned the short cone basically to 0, the medium cone to 1, like full excitation. So it's in neural terms. 0 is inhibitory, 1 is excitatory. So it was, the short was inhibited, the medium was excited, and the long was inhibited. So it's like a 0, 1, 0, and they just made it OLO for the color Olo.
Oh, so okay. So hang on. So that's
It's like 010.
10.
It's like 010. Yeah.
010 is the actual. Okay, that makes more sense to me.
And then they just turn the numbers into letters: the 0 to an O and the 1 to an L.
Yeah, and that's what OLO is.
And so they were able to see a really saturated bluish green color, is what I understood the article to say.
Okay.
And saturated in color talk, saturated means it's very deep color. Like you, if you have a really deep red, that really crimson red, if you lighten it up, eventually it becomes a pink, and that's not very saturated. A pink is not very saturated. There's a lot of white in that.
Because there's more white in it, right?
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
was going
And
to
so a
ask.
saturated color is just that deep, deep, deep color. And so that's what they were seeing.
So
They
they're seeing a
reported seeing.
deep bluish green. So listen, let me just start with this. If we're going to be talking about this on this podcast, I like my wife will tell me, "Oh, that's this color," and I'm like, "No, that's yellow." She's like, "No, it's not yellow. It's this." And we have this conversation a lot about color. Like I just kind of see the world in primary colors, and I'm realizing, and now you're backing it up. Now that I know that I'm wrong, because you're like, right, saturation. The more white that you add to something, it becomes kind of a different color. And but so I was gonna say, is this teal? But this blue green is not teal, right?
No, because that wouldn't be very saturated.
And so the more saturated, it is a really dark blue green.
That's what I understood, like a bluish green, but really, really dark saturated. And so this is also confusing. Color mixing, like if you mix colors with
Uh-huh.
paint,
Yeah,
is the opposite of mixing lights. So if you mix all the colors together, you get black.
you get black.
If you
Yes,
don't mix any colors together, basically you get white.
you're white.
But with light, if you shine all of the colors together, you get white. And if you don't shine very many colors together at all, you get black. So it's kind of those are the two opposite things.
Okay, that makes sense to me. That
Yeah.
was very confusing to start, but this
Okay.
makes sense to me. Light and the way that we is it right to say the way we interpret that energy?
That's the right way to say it, because color is not a property in the external world. There's no such thing as color. Like this shirt that I'm wearing, the pinks and blues and whites and gray, whatever's in
Yeah,
it.
I'm looking at it
Those
right now.
those colors that you're seeing are not embedded in the shirt. It's all about uh, the material, how much it absorbs light and how much it reflects light. So color, there's no color in the world. There's wavelengths of light, and those wavelengths are interpreted by our brain as color, because adding color gives us a benefit in seeing our world.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm gonna just
Okay.
push pause. Listen, let's take the shirt you're wearing.
Yeah.
That shirt was created somewhere. Okay, it was in a factory somewhere where they took different color threads, right?
Well, they're different colors of thread because you're looking at the thread. So your brain builds a color in the thread, but the thread itself isn't colored. They just pick the thread has different absorption curves on how much light it absorbs and how much it reflects, and what types of light it absorbs and what types of light it reflects. And so they take those spools of thread and create the shirt. And now the shirt's made up of threads that absorb different wavelengths of light and reflect different wavelengths. And then people's eyes interpret that. So let me say it like this. So this is getting into physics a little bit, which
That's okay.
it's
I'm the
safe.
one doing it. So
Physics
like
is safe.
okay, physics is safe.
Yeah, people are scared of physics. It's safe. It's fun.
I'm scared of physics, but
Yeah, but you
well, let's
shouldn't
see
be.
what you can do here. Because like,
Okay.
listen, my job on this podcast is to keep things kind of surface level for me.
Yes. Okay.
But I feel like I'm probably doing it a little bit already, but like I'm going to drag this into. I am so fascinated right now that I don't really. If everybody turns the podcast off right now and it's only for me,
You don't
that's
care?
going to be okay, because this is bending my brain right now, and I just got to get this solved. Okay.
Okay.
So
All
talk
right.
to me about physics.
Okay. Um, so our world, one of the energies in our world is electromagnetic energy.
Okay.
And it travels, it's in the air. electromagnetic energy bounces off solid objects, and it's on a scale. There's there's the waves, the sinusoidal waves. They have the curves. They have troughs and peaks. They curve along, and so that's like the energy. So on the smallest end, man, I don't remember. It's been a while since I've talked about this. I don't remember what some of the shortest. I think microwaves are some of the shortest, like that warm your food up in the little box in your kitchen, the
Okay.
microwave. And then some of the longest ones are radio waves, like ham radio waves. So microwaves are the trough and the peak, well, from peak to peak, it's so close. It's down in the nanometers. It's so close. It's just this tiny little wave. So it stays very, very small and focused. And then the waves get bigger and bigger, and pretty soon they get big enough that you can, like there'll be a centimeter apart or an inch apart or a foot apart or a yard. And then sometimes they're miles apart.
Between the peaks.
The two peaks might be miles apart for these radio waves, which is why they can travel all the way to South America from North America, and without a satellite. It just things that are beamed up to a satellite. But anyway, down on the really short end of this scale is just the electromagnetic wavelengths just kind of move across the different sizes. They get larger and larger. There's a window of that from about where the peaks are about 390 nanometers apart to about, I think, like 720, just say 400 to 700. It's a little below 400, a little over 700. That's our visual range. So we have receptors in our eye that are tuned into that range that can now detect electromagnetic signals from that range. So in theory, if that window that we have in our eyes opened up and got broader, then we would start seeing a lot of other things too. Like, so just below, I might get this backwards, man, I hope I don't. Just below our lowest, the smallest range we see, which is like 390 nanometers, which is our perception of the color blue. So just below that, you start getting into, I believe, the ultraviolets. And that's what insects are kind of tuned into the ultraviolet range. And that gives you a different, we don't know what insects see, but we have cameras and all that can see into the ultraviolet that gives us maybe an idea where flowers are these like bright neon type things. And it stands out because now a honeybee, for example, is seeing a flower totally different than what we see. It knows right where to go for the nectar and all of that. And then if you go above us on the other end, you get into, man, my mind is going blank, Sean. What we have, like
Thermals?
night goggles. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Can I see like Predator?
Yeah, like thermal. That's like what reptiles have. So they can see heat maps of people, like a snake. They can see us based on our heat, because that's a little bit longer wavelength than this electromagnetic scale. So now their vision is tuned up.
I slipped in a movie reference, and I want to make sure that if not you, the listener, but have you seen the movie Predator?
Yeah,
Arnold
but that's
Schwarzenegger
been so
in the
long.
80s?
Yeah, in the 80s, Schwarzenegger, yeah.
So
Okay.
the whole point is that an alien comes in from outer space and is hunting humans. And the way that they see is this thermal energy. You can see the heat coming off things. I want to see like Predator, so that's what we got to get to here in the next hour.
Side note, I went to that movie when it came out in the theater.
87, I think. Late 80s.
I was playing college basketball, and it was summer, so we were doing summer leagues where we would have practice. We had summer camp with students, elementary school kids, up till after lunch or whatever. They went home. We had games that we played. We were playing in a couple different leagues. It was like we would get there at camp at like 7 a.m. Camp would start at 8, and then we would play to like 8 or 9 at night. And this is like the third day. Some friends said, let's go see it. And we went to like the late showing that started at 11. I saw the first 15, 20 minutes. I slept through Predator. You know how sleepy you have to be to sleep through
Hey,
Predator? It
that
was
is one of
loud,
the,
flashing lights. Like,
yes, most famous action movies of the
I
80s,
know.
and you slept through it.
I slept through, and I never did actually go see it again.
Oh, it's a great
I
movie.
still
If
haven't
I
seen it.
mean, if you like that kind of thing, I don't want to. So this isn't a movie podcast, but hey, the premise of this is that Predator's advantage over even Arnold Schwarzenegger is that he can see these heat signatures, so you can't hide because your
Yeah.
body's giving off heat. And
So,
spoiler alert, Schwarzenegger just by happenstance falls in a big thing of like mud, and that
oh, it
and that
dampens his signal.
it camouflages him for a couple of minutes.
Wow.
That anyway, I want to see
Okay.
like Predators,
So,
so let's get going on this.
so infrared was the word I was looking for.
Infrared.
Yeah,
Okay.
infrared vision,
Yeah.
and snakes and reptiles have infrared vision instead
Okay.
of, they don't see in our range that we see in. They see a little bit different range, which is why they're cold-blooded. Because if they were warm-blooded, their own heat by their eyes would cloud their vision. They wouldn't be able to see. So they're the temperature of whatever they're laying around so that they can see other things that
So
they're
just to
preying
make
on.
sure, then, so let's take that. You're saying that if they can see in IR, then they can't see the blues, the red. They can't look at your shirt and see the colors
They
that
wouldn't
are on
see
your
color
shirt.
on my shirt at all. No.
Okay. And then the on the other side, the let's say the bees or those insects that can see the colors of the flowers, they also cannot see the colors in your shirt.
Well, bees actually, if I remember right, in my comparative psych classes, their vision does go up into some of our wavelengths as well. There's
But that's only
crossover.
because theirs extends into ours. Ours does not
And
extend into the other upper or lower.
right.
That was my overall
Yeah, so they
understanding.
might see, but here's the other thing. We actually, even if we have cameras that can see infrared, where we see like heat maps of people walking, like the helicopters, you can see.
Yeah, they
like,
have what we call it FLIR, but which is
okay,
just on a helicopter, I think forward-looking infrared or whatever. It's just a
Mhm.
product name. But yeah, they have infrared. And if you've ever seen like on cop shows or whatever, where they're showing people running through yards and they're just this
White thing
bright
running
white thing running through
in
a
the
completely
black.
dark
Yeah,
background. Yeah.
just stand right out, and if somebody hides behind it, you can just see them
Oh,
crouch there, going,
yeah. They're
"Yeah, we
just,
see you."
it's just this white outline laying underneath a
Yeah.
boat or something, right? Like, yeah.
So, but here's the thing: we understand what those ranges measure, and we have like technology that we've built that lets us kind of see into that range, but we still don't know what those other non-human animals are seeing. Just
Right.
like I don't know exactly what this shirt looks like to you. It might look different to you than it looks to me. It's just I don't know how your brain is interpreting those wavelengths of light. But you
Wait,
have learned that this color here, that you label that, whatever this experience is to you, you labeled it as blue, and so do I. So we
right.
agree on that and say that's blue. And so we're assuming that we both see the same thing. We probably do fairly close.
So hang on. So fairly close. I mean, I'm thinking about me being unique, which is I'm still trying to be, but I'm finding
Special, I
more and
think, is a
more.
better word.
Well, that's a whole different topic. Yes, special, but my, I mean, genetically, all the stuff that we've been talking about, and even to this point, is that when I see the light reflecting, I'm trying to remember the way you describe that shirt because I can't say it's a color anymore.
When light
'cause it's
reflects
not, but
off the shirt.
the signal it sends to me,
Mhm.
is it possible that my blue of that when I'm looking at that shirt is a little bit different than your blue?
Oh, yeah, it's probable.
So then let me ask you this question. Don't want to jump ahead here, but the article that you're talking about where people see Olo, I don't know how many people we're talking about. I know how research goes.
5, I think.
5 people?
I think 5 people have seen it.
How do you feel about 5 people? Well, maybe I don't want to put you on the spot about
Oh,
research,
no,
but
in physiology,
yeah,
2 or 3 people.
really?
If you have a neurotypical, if you can verify you have a neurotypical brain,
Mm-hmm.
then 2 or 3 or 4 people are enough.
No matter what happens from here on out,
It's
I learned something
It's
new
when you
from
ask
this podcast.
people questions that they're responding to that you need
Mhm.
larger groups, because there's so many things that go into those responses. But if I just shine a light in your eye and measure what comes out, that's and usually and then I know you're reporting what that color is to you, but just to you saying this is a color I've never seen before is enough to say, yeah, this technique is effective, is working, is effective.
Okay, so five's enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of this that takes care of my question, which was like, are they all seeing a little bit of a different variation of Olo? Even though it's a really dense blue green color, it's a little bit different maybe for each one of the five.
Yeah, probably. I mean, but they're really close, because and there's no way to know, because you can't, since there's no color in objects, since color isn't a property of an object, it's just in the brain, then you don't know exactly what people,
Right.
but so what you can do is you can measure spectral sensitivities to, well, so let me get to that, if
Okay.
that's okay, because
Yes,
I want to
please.
kind of move into the eye and then get to the eye and tell you what that is and how we can do that. I just want to make one more point about the idea of seeing things, what we see, seeing colors, or these animals that their electromagnetic, window is outside of ours, and they may be
Mm-hmm.
seeing things different. A bat, and you've heard the term blind as a bat. So
Yes.
there's some bats can see a little bit, their eyes work a little bit, but there are bats that their eyes really don't work and they
Mm-hmm.
don't give them vision, and they can fly through the night in and out of tree branches. They can grab moths. Have you ever seen have you ever tried to catch a moth with your hand? It's almost, I mean, they're just like flip, 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 while they're flying. It's so
Yeah.
hard. They just swoop in, boom, they've got the moth, they've got the mosquito or whatever. They're so quick. They very rarely run into tree branches, and they don't have eyes. Like, what are they doing? And it's, as you know, it's echolocation. So they give
Right.
this high squeal. And there's also a window on the electromagnetic scale of what we can hear, and their screech is outside of that window of what we can hear, but they can hear it. And what it does, they screech and their sound goes out, these waves go out, and they'll hit objects and bounce back to them, and their ears pick up those objects. So now their ears are picking up electromagnetic signals just like our eyes pick up electromagnetic signals. So in that sense, they're seeing with their ears, because they know the layout of trees and tree branches based on their echolocation and where the moth is, and they can swoop in and grab things out of the air. So they're still seeing. That's why seeing, you can't say it's just something that the eyes do. It's something that the
Yeah.
brain does. The
Yeah.
brain sees.
Because technically that bat, oh yeah, I mean it's seeing,
It's
right? I
seeing,
mean,
yes.
even though it doesn't have eyes, or its eyes are not, it does a bat not have eyes anatomically,
No,
or do they have eyes that don't
mhm,
work?
that don't work very well. Yeah. And yeah, I don't
Okay.
know. There's some bats. So this is going off of memory from reading articles way back in graduate school, but some bats have enough vision where the thought is they probably see shadows a little bit,
Okay.
but that doesn't help them at night when most of them fly anyway. So their eyes probably serve a different purpose than vision.
Yeah. Okay. But going back to what you said, just to continue trying to break my brain, seeing isn't really the function of the eyes; it's the function of the brain.
Right. So the brain says, give me information and I'll
Mm-hmm.
build a representation of it. And if that
Right.
information has to come through the ears because you're screaming and hearing where the sounds are coming from, then I'll build an image in the brain based on what you're hearing. And then I
Right.
can see the environment because now I've got this image built in my mind. And we use our eyes because they're very good at doing this, but not every animal does. But anyway, that's kind of the physics of light bounces off objects, and almost everything we see is reflected light. I mean, don't look directly at the sun, right? And then,
Right.
a flashlight or something, if you're looking directly, it hurts your eyes. So you usually don't look directly into a light source. It's light reflecting off of something, like sunlight
Bouncing
bouncing off
back.
of objects. And so
Right.
objects, their density, and not just density, that's the wrong word, but the properties they have absorb some lights and reflect others. And so paint
Okay.
has that property in it. So if you paint your walls white, then white doesn't absorb hardly any wavelengths of light. So it bounces back and forth off white. So it looks like a bright room. But if you paint your walls really dark color like black or a really dark blue, that absorbs a lot of the light. And so not much bounces off. And it's more of a dark room because there's not as much light in it for that reason. And so if you have an object that absorbs short wavelengths of light, and short wavelengths are usually what we perceive as being blues, and
Okay.
mediums are greens, and long wavelengths of light are reds. So kind of in the red range. So it's like blue, green, and red. And then from red, as you start to back off, it gets more and more orange, and then yellow, and then to greens, and then to purples, and then to blues. I mean, there's that graduation of it. So wavelengths of light, that they're spread out through there, but that's kind of the range of it. So if a object absorbs short wavelengths of light, that means as the light comes in, it's absorbing those blue wavelengths. So the light that gets reflected are the greens and reds of it. And then
Okay.
if it's a long wavelengths that are absorbed, then the short wavelengths bounce back, and now that object looks blue to you.
So can we go back to the article you're referring to?
Mm-hmm.
I have two questions, well, maybe more than two, but my first two questions. First, is it fair to say that what they were actually what they actually found was a procedure or a technique to manipulate a cone, an SM or an L in the eye, and not so much the new color? I mean, the
Yeah,
new colors, what the article, the headlines are, we discovered a new color.
yeah.
But the reality is they're talking about, because I'm going back to your response. Your daughter says, "Have you seen this thing?" And you're like, that's not possible
Mm-hmm.
unless you're able to isolate one of the cones in the eye and somehow manipulate it to make it see, putting that in air quotes, to see this new color. What they're really talking about is what would you call it? The technique, the procedure, the process, something
Uh,
like that.
yeah. So and I can't remember which they what they call the equipment, but it's so there's in each eye. Okay, so let me back up a little. As light reflects off something, it enters the eye.
Mhm.
And at the very back of the eye, sitting like wrapped around the very back, is the retina. So you've heard of the retina. And
Yes.
that's a thin layer of tissue that is full of receptors that takes in light. And there's two main types of receptors. There's rods and cones.
Heard of those.
Okay, and they're named that because they're shaped. If you look at them through a microscope, an electron microscope, the rods look like tubes. They stand a little bit taller, and those are the rods. And then the cones are just cone shaped. And that's the two types of receptor cells. And they're spread throughout your eye, but almost all of your cones are in the center of your eye, close to your fovea. And then they get fewer and fewer as they go out. And the rods are almost all in your periphery. There's none in the fovea, in the center of your vision. They're all in the periphery. And rods process information like light value, how bright something is, so luminance levels, so it's brightness and motion. And then the cones process information that leads to color perception and fine detail and acuity and those types of things. And then out of those cones, for most people, their cones are kind of distributed into three ways where they're tuned into specific wavelengths of light. And it's
Short,
so
medium, long.
yeah. And so
SML.
so they just call them S cones, M cones, and L cones for the short, medium, and long. Some people refer to them as blue cones, green cones, and red cones. But again, there's no color to it. If that helps you, you can say that if it helps you understand which cone class you're talking about. But these cones, they have, if you can isolate a cone, you can find its what's called its spectral sensitivity. So it's a curve. So let's say that the medium cone is most excited. It gives its biggest signal to 400, or let's say it gives its biggest signal to like 510 nanometers wavelength. That's 510 nanometers.
Okay.
It'll respond the most to that. But then if you do 509, 508, 507, it'll respond, but gradually it decreases. So it creates this shape, this kind of wave shape. And at the tip of the wave is what it's most sensitive to, but then it has tails that go off. It can still be sensitive to shorter wavelengths of light. Just it won't respond very well, but it can still respond to a shorter wavelength of light. But you get its biggest response out of a certain wavelength. And what has happened is, I think at one time there was one cone that kind of split into two, the short and the long, and then the long kind of split in two again. So the long wavelength cone and the medium wavelength cone, their sensitivity curves almost overlap on top of each other. And so that's what gives us, the three cones give us the ability to see all the what we would say the colors in the range of human vision. If you okay, I'll stop there as far as cones, but they were able to isolate just the M cones. But normally, if you get, so I'll say it this way. So let's say that 510 is the wavelengths, nanometers, 510 nanometers, that wavelength of light is the one that is best able to excite the medium cone. Well, when you shine that in the eye, that excites the medium wavelength cone, but it also excites the long wavelength cone, just not as much.
Yep.
So their comparison is what gives you the color. So that's why I was saying, well, the only way you could come up with a new color is if you were somehow able to turn off some of the receptors and just isolate one receptor, which nobody's been able to do up until this study. That's why it's so fascinating. They were able, the way I read it, and I just read it once and not real, and I hate to say this, I did not go to the original article because I did not want to buy it. So I went to a source.
If there's a paywall, I will allow you to act like Sean in this one instance.
I went to a source that is really good normally at giving the information across. And so what they said is they were able to map the back of the retina and find separate the M and L cones and S cones from each other, and then have this extremely small laser, this patch that would the light that would strike just the M cones. And that technology has not been available before. I didn't know it was available, but it is now. So now they can excite, from what I'm reading, just the medium wavelengths of cones, which is why it's a new color. Because if they sent that wavelength in of 510 nanometers, that's not a new wavelength. It just always, there's two different cone types that respond to it. And you get a sense that's a really dark green color. But now you take out the long waves, kind of its calculation into it, and now you have a totally new experience that your brain has never had before.
And so with this, and this is what I was trying to get to, is what you just described. All of the headlines about what happened are about there's a new color, but that's not the story. From what I'm understanding, the story is that they were able to map the back of the eyeball and isolate one of the receptors and only give that one, but we're not designed for that. We're designed that when one gets some information, another or all three get information.
Yes.
And that is informing my brain, oh, that's this. But they have found a way to manipulate that a little bit and only give information to one of those things. That's why it's new. That was the point that I was trying to get to. It's not about the color, because what I'm getting from you is color isn't real anyway. What it is that we are able to manipulate either the information or the way that the information is received, and that is making the brain do something new. That's what's exciting to me. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. So yeah, and you're right. It's not a new color. It's just making the brain do something that it hasn't done before. It's experiencing
Something new.
something it hasn't experienced before. And so then your
Yes.
brain's building that image going, oh, wow. So it has a response for it. It can build it. It's just never been given that signal like that
Again,
in that way before.
I like how you just put that, because that's a more succinct way of what I'm saying is we're people like you, my view of the world is you're always trying to learn more about the brain and not push the brain, but just kind of see how it works and what it'll do. These people figured out a way to make the brain do something ostensibly it's never done before, and it
Yep.
was able to handle it without any issue. It was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's here's the color. It's this new color.
And it wasn't like the brain said, oh, I think what you're trying to do was, and so it shows you a color you've already, it's like, no, here's one.
No,
They're going, whoa, I have never seen that. And I guess all 5 of them said, I have never seen that color before.
right, yeah. The brain was able to handle whatever they threw at it, even though it's again completely novel from my understanding.
Now
That
it,
it
and
Go
it would
ahead.
have to be somebody who has trichromatic vision. And so I'll tell you this, tri means 3, right?
I knew that one.
Okay. And chromatic is color.
Oh, okay.
So trichromatic is 3 colors. So it means
Mhm.
you have 3 cone types. And then, you've heard of people that are colorblind.
Yes.
There are people that are colorblind, but that's extremely rare. So most of the time when they say, I'm colorblind, it means they can't differentiate between red and green. They get those colors mixed up. So they're still seeing colors, but they can't tell the difference between some colors.
Right. We have taken the term color blind and kind of unintentionally, I think we as a people, but have extended that to mean I have trouble differentiating between 2 colors. So what does
Yeah.
color blind actually mean? You cannot see color?
So
At all.
so people who say I'm colorblind, the most typical type of, it's really color deficiency.
Right.
And they're dichromatic. So they have 2 cone types.
Okay.
And so I said there's about 6 million cones in each eye, and there's about 120 million rods. So there's a lot more rods.
Okay.
But out of these 6 million cones, somebody who's color deficient, who's dichromat, they still have 6 million cones like everybody else. So their visual acuity is still as good. It's just they're like the I don't know how to use it except for technical terms, but there's opsin in each eye that absorbs packets of light, photons of light. That's how the wavelengths come in, and it absorbs, that opsin absorbs it. So long wavelength cones have red opsin, I'll just say, and maybe medium have green opsin. So a dichromat has the same number of cones, of medium and long cones. It's just they both have the same opsin in it. So some dichromats, all their kind of medium and long cones, and you can't tell them apart by looking. It's what they're most sensitive to. But all of their medium and long cones have red opsin in it. And there's another type of color deficiency where all of them have green opsin. But they have the same number of cones. It's just they only have 2 spectral sensitivities for kind of short and medium or short and long. And then there's a monochromat that has fewer cones as well, but it's almost always they have their S cones or short cones. And then there's an achromat. A person with achromacy sees no colors. They just have rods. And those are the people that are truly colorblind, and it's fairly rare, but they only have rods which respond to brightness levels. And so when things get dark and you turn out the lights, your cones stop working. They have to have a certain amount of light before they work. So they stop working, and at that point you're using rod vision, which is why you can't see color at night. And the people that have achromatopsia, they only have rods. So in bright daylight, they're blinking like this, and they're holding their eyes kind of shut. If you've seen somebody that does this a lot when in light places, it's probably because they have achromatopsia, and they see no colors. And there's a really cool, I don't know if you can access it. I was able to get it out of a library that was closing, a university library. I don't even know if it's still available, but you've heard of Oliver Sacks, I'm sure, that wrote the book, like The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
Yes.
And
Yes. I didn't remember his name, but I remember
okay.
yeah.
he might, I think he wrote a book about it too, but he had an educational movie that I would show to students in class called The Island of the Colorblind. And there's an island where a large population, because it's isolated and because color vision is genetic, and there were a huge storm that came through and wiped out almost the whole population, and the ones that were left had achromatopsia, most of them. And so now it's rampant on this island. And he went to the island, and one of the things they did immediately was he took just duffel bags full of kind of blue blocker sunglasses.
Mm.
And the people were so happy. They were videoing them when they would try them on, and the smiles on their face, because now they could walk around in the daylight and see, and they were just like so excited. But that's because that's true color blindness.
Right.
So I'm not sure what got me all the way off on that, but I was talking about trichromacy, right? That people have.
But so number one, there are people, but they're rare that that see the world like the fight scene in Kill Bill 1, The House of Blue Leaves. Sorry, I like movies.
I love the
it's in black and white. The whole fight scene. It's a color movie that as soon as the fight starts goes just black and white.
Okay.
But that there are actual people
that's how they see their world.
They see the world. No color.
Right. That is extremely rare.
But there are more people, I don't know what the numbers are, but that say they're colorblind, but their issues are with reds and greens.
Yeah, almost anytime you hear somebody say I'm colorblind,
right.
they're a dichromat, so they have a hard time distinguishing between red and green.
Right.
And if you put red and green beside each other, they would say, oh, I see the difference, because usually there's a luminance level, there's a brightness level. So the rods can say those two colors are different, but it looks like it's like 2 shades of red or 2 shades of green to them.
Now I'm going to ask you a question. You have full permission to say, Sean, I have no idea. But
okay.
What if you take a person who we're describing now with say it again, the
dichromat.
We take one of them. And what if one of them were in the research? They were one of the 5 people.
That's where I was going to. That's where I was getting to. Thank you for bringing me back.
We're both going to the same place.
Yeah. I forgot where, after I went off all the way to the island of the colorblind and came back, I was like, I don't know what I was going to say, but that's what I was going to say.
Because I'm curious, what if I'm sure that before they participated in this research, there was something that was done to ensure.
They screened for color vision, because if you have a dichromat and you isolate their cone, it's going to be medium or long, one or the other. And it's going to respond to that wavelength of light, but it might be outside of the blue, so of the short wavelength. So they will see it as a color they've seen before, because those are colors that they have seen before. So I don't think they would see, especially if it's a protanope. There's protanopes and deuteranopes, which are depending on if you have the red opsin or the green opsin. So
those
especially
sound like made up words, John. Don't make up words on this podcast.
If you have the red opsin, so you're more sensitive to the longer wavelengths of light, and your dichromat means you'd be sensitive to the longest wavelengths of light and the shortest. So then there's a gap in between. And so then you're more likely, if you show a long wavelength of light, that they would see it, that their long wavelength cone would and their short wouldn't. But that would just be a color they've already experienced, because that happens to them a lot.
So if 4 people are like, this is like 4 out of 5 dentists agree, right?
Yeah.
4 people are like, that is the brightest blue-green I've ever seen. And the 5th person is like, that's red. What are you talking about?
That would be, but see, you screen ahead of time, so you don't
I understand.
Run into that.
It'd just be more fun. Listen, bro science would be a lot more fun, where I just take 5 random people and go, what color is that? That'd be a lot more fun.
That is fun, but it's a little bit more expensive, because that equipment costs a lot to run, I'm sure. But
yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. I'm really excited about this topic, because this is something I studied a lot in graduate school. I worked in the vision science lab. In fact, when I graduated, I know I don't look like a guy that's all tatted up but I do have tattoos. I've got 2 tattoos. One is I have Casey tattooed on my heart, and one, on the skin above my heart. So not on my
Thank you,
heart.
because I didn't want to. It seemed like a good moment, but I did not want to interrupt this.
It hit me. Words matter.
Words
And then I
matter.
said,
Thank you.
and I don't want the listener to think of me in an operating room where their sick surgeon just cracked
Just
open
cracked
my
your chest and they're
then
tattooing your heart.
somebody rolls up in the little chair with a tattoo on,
I love
starts
it.
putting Casey on my. No, it's on my chest,
Mhm.
and then I have on my arm, my right arm, I have the word vision in Greek letters tattooed on when I got my PhD, because I worked in the vision science lab,
Mhm.
and it was kind of a nod to the ancient Greeks, the first ones who were trying to understand how vision works. So anyway, so I love vision. So I love this topic that we're talking about. But in our vision science lab, we can, if we're running tests and somebody doesn't have color vision, then that kind of defeats the purpose of the test. So, and students, it was kind of hard to get to our building. We were on the 4th floor, and so it was a lot of effort to get there. So we don't want them to show up and then say, oh, you can't be in the study because you don't have color vision. So we would put signs around, if you want to be in the study, and we would put the Ishihara test, the little bubbles where you can see a
with
number
the
in
letters and numbers and letters in the bubble.
numbers or letters, and it said, if you can see this number, then you can sign up for the exam. But you wouldn't believe it, Sean. There were people who would show, and we would say, this is for color vision. You have to have. It wasn't like a trick, like we get them. It was, this is about normal color, typical color vision. You have to have color vision to participate. See if you can see this letter before you sign up. This number. There were probably maybe 4 or 5% of the college students who would come to the experiment. That we would run then a lot more accurate screening tests that were dichromats, and they had no idea. They lived their whole life and had no idea. Because,
but they can see the number or the letter in the bubble.
Yeah, because and we knew that wasn't going to catch everybody, because the true color plates are colored, were made to make sure that the luminance value was the same, only color differed. But when you print something out on a piece of paper, depending on which printer you use, you might be able to see something. A dichromat can maybe even see it, because the printer can do different luminous, like different contrast levels. So it's not the best way, but it would screen out some. And then those who got past that and then got in the lab and we would run our different tests, a lot of them found out, and some of them were like distraught and upset. And my response was, you didn't even know it till now.
You've
been
lived
living
your whole
life just
life
fine. You're
just
okay.
fine until now.
You're okay. Color vision, being what they call colorblind, color deficient, is not a problem in our world.
Yeah.
You're perfectly fine.
What problems might it? So let me just preface this before I put you on the spot. One of the tests that you have to go through to become a police officer is you can't be color deficient. They call it colorblind, but I'm calling you can't be color deficient to be a police officer. So is that, just
or
because,
a pilot?
Well, why do you think that is?
Yeah, so the reason you can't be a cop or a pilot is because you have to see colors like stoplights and different things. You have to be able, with a police officer, to say they're wearing a red shirt or a green shirt.
That makes sense.
Get those correct. And pilots, as they're coming in for landings, there's red and green lights that if they're red, you're too high. If they're yellow, you're too low or something. They need to be white.
Okay.
Or so there's lights like coming in for landing. So it's some things like that why color vision is required. But for most things, and those are man-made reasons. For color.
But the same reason though, if I forget about cop and pilot, I learn if I have one of these, I don't want to say issues, if I'm, just because I can't say the dang word,
if you're
color deficient. But if I start to drive, I don't need to see red, yellow, and green because of the position of the light on where the light is. If it's in the middle, I don't really have to know that's yellow as much as when it's in the middle, I know it's about to turn to the top one, which means I'm not supposed to be in the intersection.
Yeah, unless you are in the South. There's some places in the South, some states where that it's sideways.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
red,
But I
green,
mean,
yellow
you
lights.
learn. I guess my
But you
point
learn the
is no matter
pattern.
you learn the position
Yep.
of where the light is coming from and what it means to you.
Yep.
You don't need to know red light, green light.
Right. No, that's true.
It's nice to have. Speaking as a privileged trichromatic
Trichromat.
person, but yeah. So I have so many things because, like, I'll go back to what I want to just kind of end with is talking about light and dark. Meaning, when I was in the Marine Corps, um, in boot camp, and then also in like infantry training, I didn't go to infantry training, by the way, but because if a Marine was listening to this, they'd be. It's kind of like your research thing, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go to infantry training, that's 3 months, and you're a combat Marine. If you're a person who has another profession like me, as an MP, you go to like 28 days of infantry training. It's very different. So anyway, in the training that we went through to fight in the dark, to do combat operations in the dark, we talked about rods and cones.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about strategies, how to improve your night vision. I'm putting that in air quotes. And even, oh boy, I've been doing a lot of movie references to you today, but in the movie version of Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise, not most people who've read the book don't like that movie, but Robert Duvall is like an old school sniper, and he puts an eye patch over one of his eyes as the light starts to go down, and then when it gets dark and he's ready to actually shoot, he takes the eye patch off.
Yeah.
As one of the strategies. That's not what we learned in the Marine Corps. But again, they were talking about, preserving night vision, not doing these things. Even like there's map reading lights that are these red lights. You get where I'm going with all this. So I mean, I kind of got most of what you've talked about in this podcast, but when it comes to, you said seeing in the dark and think because in the dark you see movement out of your periphery, and I'm assuming that's because of the anatomical design that you described with rods and cones. But I don't even know what my question really is. I'm just really interested in the difference between
Seeing in the
light and dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why.
So when it gets dusk and it's getting darker and darker, your cones stop operating. And one of the things that kind of blew my mind when I was in college learning about this was when the professor said, yeah, if you have a bookshelf, then wait till it's dark where you just have just a little bit of light, maybe some moonlight coming in or something, and go look and try to find a red book or a blue book or a green book. And you can't. And I was like, yes, I can. And you can't because it's your rods that are operating. They give no input to the color center in your brain. There's a place in your brain that adds color to the image your brain's creating. And the rods don't go through that area. Only the cone information goes through that area. So color is never added to rod vision, but rods can pick up just little bits of light they can pick up to you. So like I've been using a lot of comparative stuff, but dogs have a lot more rods than they have cones. And they have two types of cones, by the way. People say dogs are colorblind. I don't know if they are or not, but they have two functioning cones. So they're probably not.
So probably not colorblind.
Probably not colorblind. But if you've ever seen a dog, if you're in a yard or something and there's a rabbit like 30 yards in front of it sitting real still, the dog would just be looking around and look right past it like over and over. But if that rabbit's ear twitches, man, that dog just locks right in on that because they have so many more rods and their rods are so sensitive. And that's what detects movement and motion. So then that's what locks them in, which is why the fight, flight, freeze is important. The freeze part is important for a lot of animals because if they just hold very, very still, the predator will look past them. And so we have rods like that as well, but they're in our periphery. So if you look right at something, then those rods, your fovea doesn't have rods. So it's why, like, if you see the moon, you can stare right at the moon. There's enough light coming from the moon that your cones will give you a little bit of information. But if you try to look at stars, if the star is dim enough, when you look at it, it disappears. But when you look away from it, you can see it again in your periphery. But then you look back at it and it's gone. And then you look away from it and you can see it again. It's because it's bright enough for your rods to pick up, but not bright enough for your
but not
cones
for
to
your
pick up.
cones.
So it like disappears. So it's better to kind of look in your periphery to see some of the stars and things. But then when you're during the day, your rods are mostly saturated because there's so much light. But when they're operating at night, they're very active. And what happens is if you've been in the dark, like if you're in your house and you're walking around, it's dark and you've adjusted to this, there's still enough light that you can see where the couch is. You can walk around anything and you can go wherever and get there just fine, like to the kitchen or whatever. And you flip on a kitchen light and then you're like, and it actually hurts your eyes. Like it hurts. It's because now you've just flooded the rods who are like, they're open and ready to take in any little bit of light energy that they can get. Now all of a sudden it's just all this light energy, and it takes you a little bit to adjust to that. You kind of have to squint for a while before you can adjust to that, because your night vision had basically turned off the cones and turned the rod sensitivity way up, and then you just flood it with light and it hurts for a minute, but then your cones, it takes them a little bit and they start working. Now you're operating in cone vision. But then when you turn the lights back off, now you can't see anything to get back to your room. You stub your toe on the table and run into the couch because there's no light for your cones, but your rods are saturated. It takes a while for them to recover to start operating again, like 3 minutes or something.
I probably shouldn't admit this, but I don't think it'll surprise anybody that I had another dumb thought here. But I always thought what you're describing right there was your pupils. Like, when your pupils dilate to take in more information, and then you I thought it was your pupils that were affected, but they're affected but it's your rods light that are screaming when the light comes on.
Yeah. So it's
not your pupils.
But your pupils in darkness open up really wide to let in as much light as they can for your rods to have access to.
Right.
And then when it's bright, they close way down, because again, if there's too much light back there, it can hurt.
Right. But the actual flipping on the light in the dark is not your pupils reacting to that change. It's your rods.
It's not your pupils hurting. Yeah.
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah. And I always thought it was.
Okay.
So I've learned so much, John. I've known you for, I would say, a long time. I didn't know you had tattoos. That's number one.
Really?
Yeah, I did not know that. And I definitely didn't know that you had a tattoo in Latin of vision on your arm. Greek, sorry.
Greek, yeah. Because you'll find this interesting, because I know you like philosophy.
I do.
And you like Plato and Aristotle.
The Greeks, yeah.
So Plato's idea was that how we're able to see, and think about it, do I have time to tell this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have all the time in the world.
Will the listeners turn us off if I tell one more story?
They turned off about 26 minutes ago.
They probably
did. That's okay.
So Plato, his idea was, because they're sitting here saying, how do we see? They didn't even know that there were cells in the body.
Right.
They weren't even sure what the brain did or the heart or the lungs. Like, we're getting ideas about what all that, but just think about not having that knowledge, but then trying to figure out how we're able to see. They came up with such clever ideas, and that sounds like I'm being condescending. They're way smarter than I never could have come up with this. I'm not trying to sound condescending, but it amazes me at what they came up with for vision. But the idea that Plato had was that light comes out of your eye and it mixes and blends with the light that's already in the world to create kind of like a flow. And then it allows your light to reach out and kind of touch and grab objects like your hands do. Like if I close my eyes and I can feel a rock and go, that's a rock. And I can feel, oh, that's my chair. So your hands using your hands, you can kind of build an image in your mind of what something is. So they were thinking, Plato was thinking that's probably what our eyes are doing, something similar to the hands, but there's nothing that actually reaches out of the eye. It's that light that it sends out, that it kind of touches and feels different things and comes back. And so that's how we see.
Yeah.
So it was just they were kind of wrestling with vision, which is why I had the kind of throwback to the Greeks
I
with
love that.
vision.
I love that. All of that. And again, thinking about, 300, whatever Plato was operating in, what year.
Mhm.
But you described how bats, quote unquote, see.
Mhm.
They send out sound, and
Mhm.
it comes back with information.
Yeah.
So at that time, not knowing what we know now, is it that crazy to think that we send out something from our eyes, and then that information comes back and builds? It's not that crazy to
It's
me.
not that crazy. And actually, if he would have used sound and ear instead of the eye and light, he would have described
He would have
echolocation.
been
Yeah,
right.
he would have been
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no,
Wow.
and then another. I can't remember which Greek philosopher it was, but he said that all the objects have the really thin pieces of kind of layers, like almost like skin, that get kind of poofed off of them and float through the air, and that touches our eye because there had to be some
Mm.
touch of some kind, and then our eye saw that from that puff of skin. So just different ways to try to think about how we're able to see, and then to get to where we are now with microscopes and all, where we can see the different cell types, and now we can isolate one of the cones. That's still blowing my mind. I haven't processed that fully yet, that article that was just written, because I had no idea we were able to do that. I wouldn't
Isolate a
have guessed that
cone,
we could.
send it information that it is designed not to take in information by itself, and make it take in information by itself, and then see what the brain does with that information.
Yeah, it's like the same information it's had before.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now it's like if you and I were working on a project together, and every time that project came, you did one part of it and I did the other, and we sent it on and sent it on, and all of a sudden you're not there, and then I get the problem by myself. It looks like a different problem to me.
Yes.
And that's kind of the
Yes.
wavelengths of light. It's used to medium and long cones working together, and this time they isolated where they couldn't, and people
Mm-hmm.
saw a whole new color. I love it.
Fascinating.
Exciting.
That is
Olo.
fascinating. Olo.
Olo.
I say it every time, but I hope that people understand how sincere this is. I looked up and we're at an hour, and
Wow.
it flew by. I feel like we could do at least another hour on
Well,
all the questions I have.
I did like 4 years of this, so I know we can
Yeah,
do it in graduate
you could
school.
I'm sure you have enough
But
that we could.
what did you find
Oh,
that was kind of the most mind-bending thing for you? Because I'm curious about that, like everything we talked about today.
yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things is that the idea of, so I've heard of cones SML before,
Mm-hmm.
never knew what those stood for. I just always referred to them as S cones, M cones. I didn't know that they were small, medium, large, and that they referred to wavelengths.
Mm-hmm.
And so that part, I was like, oh man, as usual, I know just enough to get in trouble. And then when you put it all together, it's like, that makes complete sense to me. Microwave, the different wavelengths and what we're taking in, and then how we're processing those different wavelengths.
Well,
That's the biggest thing to me,
okay, and
probably.
one other thing you said is you and your wife argue over colors.
Well, no, we don't. I don't argue with my wife. Let's just be
Oh,
clear,
okay.
because that's futile. I know what the end result's going to be.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Okay.
whether I've come to a point, I don't know if it's age but in jujitsu, in life, in everything, I believe in efficiency. And it's
Hmm.
the most efficient thing is for me just to know that she's right, because it's usually true. So
You
I don't
know,
argue.
that I think I learned something here today too. I'm going to start thinking about that. That
Efficiency,
is
John.
efficiency. Yeah. Yeah.
Listen,
Why
I have
waste
a
energy and
lifetime.
time?
It's
Mm-hmm.
35 years of experience,
Okay.
right? You had 4 years in the vision lab. You got a lot of info out of that, right? I have 35 years of just experience.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
I'm right. I argue my point, and at the end of it, I'm wrong.
Why waste time?
Legitimately wrong. Why am I going to waste time?
Yeah.
Anyway, not arguing with her, but the idea that she looks at a shirt, she looks at your shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not a good example. There's a lot of colors in there, right? But she's like, that's salmon
Mm-hmm.
color. This thing is taupe, whatever. And I'm like, that's brown. That's pink. And so it's not that I don't see those colors. It's just Like there's
Labeling
primary
them.
labeling those colors is hard for me.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
there are people that have they're trichromats,
Mhm.
but they're medium and long, medium wavelength, long wavelength spectral sensitivities are almost on top of each other. There's not much of a separation. So then they're called color weak. So they still have color vision, but they're color weak because
Color weak.
they still can get some colors like some greens and blues mixed up.
Mm.
But it's because of their color weak. They still have all three cone types. But it's why television makes it difficult, because now you've got your RGB, your red, green, blue lights, and you can set those. And now, because people's spectral sensitivities are a little bit different, somebody will say those faces look too green, and they're going, I don't see any green in the face at all. It looks more red to me, and it's more green. It's because that's like again almost like a laboratory where you can isolate those three color combinations, and then people
Yeah.
experience it differently. But in the natural world, like the sun emits energy from all wavelengths of light. That's why it looks white, like really bright. But then as it's coming through our atmosphere, there's dust in the atmosphere. So dust absorbs some wavelengths of light and reflects others, which is why the sky is blue. When you get outside of our atmosphere, the sky is black, right? All those pictures of
Right.
space is black because there's nothing for light to reflect off of. But around our Earth is the atmosphere with dirt particles and different types of compound particles and stuff, and oxygen and things like that light reflects off of.
So you asked about my takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
So I have just a second one real quick. So the first one, again, SML, the cones, all of that information. But the second one is the idea. I keep looking at your shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm thinking about the threads that came together to make that shirt, that are blue and pink and but the idea that those threads in my head, those threads get put together to make that shirt, and that is true. Those threads got put together, but it's not the color of the threads. It's the message those threads are sending, the density of all of the information that I'm getting. I'm still not there yet.
What they
As you can
reflect,
hear,
what they
as
reflect off.
what they take in, what they reflect, all of that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm ready for this.
Do you know
as
those
a
old like street lights, sodium street lights are kind of yellow?
sodium street lights.
So street
Yeah.
lights, the older street lights, it's like
Yeah.
a sodium bulb. So it's kind of a yellowish light.
Mm-hmm.
So walk under that with a shirt on, you know what color it is, and look at it. It'll look like a totally different color because it's different wavelengths of light reflecting off of it. So your red shirt doesn't look red under a sodium light, like out a street light.
And that's because of the type of light that it's sending
That's
out. It's
the
a different
wavelength that's
wavelength.
reflecting off your shirt now. It's not from the sun or from a light in a room. That's why fluorescent lights can make things look different, because they just send out like 2 or 3 wavelengths instead of a broad range of wavelengths. And so then clothes look different, your skin looks different, because what's reflecting off, your brain just takes that and adds the color to it, because there's no color in your skin. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter what kind of light, it would be that color coming off. It's just the reflected light, and your brain builds that.
Final movie reference of the day for you: Joe versus a Volcano. Great Tom Hanks movie. But they work in this basement with fluorescent lights. And when he goes on his rant, he just screams about the lights and how the lights make everybody look like they're dead and their souls have been sucked out of them. But now I know it's just because it's fluorescent lights.
It's only given a couple different wavelengths. Yeah.
Okay. Now you're changing how I watch movies.
Good.
We got Kill Bill, Predator, Joe versus some of my favorites, but
good.
Well, John, I've kept you way longer than I meant to, so I appreciate the time. And this one, like I said, I feel like we could go a lot longer. I'm going to have to process some of the information you gave me, but this was really good for me.
Keep your neurons firing.
I'm going to try. I try that. I am pretty good about an open mind, but thank you, John, for that. This has been a long episode, and I got to go a little bit longer. We've had some changes to the podcast, not to the podcast, but around the podcast. And so John has offered some of his insights as to what we could improve or change. So some updates for you all. Is we started a TikTok account. I've been loading clips onto TikTok. So if you're on TikTok, you can find us at John Teaches Sean. The other big one that I'm somewhat happy with it. I'm saying that because I kind of created it, but we started a website. And even though I'm still trying to update it, if you want to go to the website and take a look at it, that is johnteachessean.com. And if you go to the website, you can find our socials on there, but you can also listen to the podcast through the website if that's something you like doing. I've added the podcast to Amazon Music and iHeartRadio. So if you have subscriptions to either of those, you can find the podcast on there. We're still on Spotify. We're still on YouTube. And I didn't mean to take it on as a tagline, but if you like what we're doing, if you enjoy these conversations, then like, follow, subscribe on any of those platforms. And if you love it, then tell a couple friends. I say it in the intro. I don't know how the algorithms work. There's some kind of AI at play, but I just know the more that we get likes, follows, subscriptions, the better it is for us. And we get to keep doing what we're doing. And I really like this. I think John's starting to warm up to it. So if we can keep doing this, that would be great. And until next time, thank you all.